Ian Miller. Ian Miller was a fine young guitar player. Probably best known for his work as guitarist with John Paul Young and the All-Stars, with whom he recorded the Lovers in the Air and Heaven Set albums, and toured South Africa in the late 1970s with John Paul Young. Ian Miller was also an accomplished producer, discovered, according to Peter Dawkins, in 1969, working in the EMI warehouse in Melbourne. I'm a bit worried about that whole idea of being discovered in a warehouse. But nonetheless, he was promoted to look after the local artist roster in Melbourne. He was already playing professionally with a band called Langford Lever during the period, which he described to me as his jazz fusion period. And that was followed by the progressive rock six-piece band Chitaka and then the Wild Beaver Dan before he joined the All-Stars in January 1977, leaving the band 2 years later. As a staff producer, Miller had found himself working with, among others, Lobby Lloyd's Coloured Balls, someone else who's just passed away, Jim Keys from the Master's Apprentices, and the Moyer Sisters, whose single, Morning, Good Morning, for which single he won the FACB Award for Best Producer in 1974. That year also saw him quit working as a full-time house producer for EMI, opting to freelance over the next decades for Albert Productions, WEA, EMI, Giant Records and festivals, Razzle Records, among others. Razzle Records, for which he produced the Australian Guitar album. He also wrote a number of guitar-playing manuals that were published both in Australia and in the US through Warner Chappell Music. He ran the music business course at the Sydney-based JMC Academy from 1994 to 2004, after which Miller decided to return to his first love, performing, recording 2 independent albums, an eponymous album in 2005, and It's a Beautiful Day to Fly in 2008. Miller died in May this year, aged 57, after battling lymphedema for several years. Pat Alton. There must be a few people out there that remember Pat Alton. Okay. Beginning his career as a singer with the then Adelaide-based group The Clefs, which became the Levi Smith Clefs, the Irish-born Pat Alton made his initial mark working with Adelaide entrepreneur Ivan Damon and his Sunshine Group, which grew into include a management and booking agency, record labels, and a string of pop music venues from Adelaide to Queensland, many of which I'm sure members of the audience have played in the past, back in the 60s, and probably are still waiting for the money, if I remember what Ivan Damon's reputation was like. Pat was lucky. He was allowed to set up the Sunshine Recording Company, the official recording arm of the Sunshine Group, and produced many of the early hits by Normie Rowe, Tony Worsley, Tony McCann, Peter Doyle, the Dave Miller Set, and the Purple Hearts, among many, becoming the house producer at Festival Records in 1967, with whom he worked until 1973. After leaving Festival, Alton went into jingle writing, creating some of the seminal signature tunes for products as diverse as Wheat Bix. Yes, he's the man that wrote Wheat Bix Kids. You know the song. Coca-Cola, Singapore Airlines, and most famously, or perhaps infamously, the Australian Labor Party, writing the It's Time campaign song for the 1972 federal election. That was Pat Alton. Sadly, though, it seems it didn't represent necessarily his political affiliations, as he admitted once in 1997. He said, "I'm cross-political. It's called Take the Money and Run." In the end, it was just another gig. Which is a bit deflating, I think. But at the end of the day, I mean, a songwriter is a songwriter. The job is to come up with the goods. End of story. Anyway, in the end, the jingle writing took him to New York for a few years in the late 1970s. Ostensibly retiring to Noosa in the late 1990s, he continued to work nonetheless as a vocal coach. Pat Alton died peacefully at home in February this year, aged in his early 70s.